Hello and welcome to another episode of the Enhanced Pod. On today's episode, I have an incredibly accomplished sports physio with me. She has been part of multiple sporting codes from amateur level to provincial level to professional level to international level as well. She's been in football, cricket, hockey. She's a business owner. She is, above all, a mom, an incredible human, a relationships person, and it's such a privilege to have her with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Neline Hoffman Kellerman. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks for having me. It's a privilege to be part of your podcast. You're doing some awesome work, enlightening the youth of today of what's going around in physio, and you also drive for the profession, which is very, very cool. So thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure. And I think that's exactly what we want to go for. We want to be elevating sports physio in South Africa and telling the stories of the incredible professionals that are driving our industry. So, Neline, let's jump right in. I want to go back to
Okay.
the origins of your journey into sports physio. Where does it all start?
Right. Nick, my journey into sports physio has been a very long one. To the international stage, but starting from the origin, I did community service in 2007, and directly after community service, I got the privilege of getting a job at McCord in Repton, which was a sports-based physio practice. And Jackie was the physio for Supersport United, and Ian was the physio for the Titans back then. They took me under their wing and they taught me a lot of things, and then trusted me working with Northern's hockey. And later, I then got allowed to be the assistant physio for either Titans or Supersport United, where I was required. In 2010, Jackie gave me the privilege to be the head physio for Supersport United. I took over from her, and then from there, I moved over to Bidvest Wits Football Club. In 2015, I had the biggest blessing in life. I became a mom. So when I became a mom, I also took a sabbatical from sports physio for a couple of years. I believe that in the early childhood development years, it's very, very, very important that the mom's home for the little one. So I took a sabbatical, and in the 2021-22 season, I actually joined Mpumalanga Rhinos cricket. And then I think it's 23-24. Finished with them, and then last year May got the call up to assist the Proteas women cricket team. That's been the biggest privilege and honor of my career. I think we all aspire to reach the international stage at some point in our careers. But it's been quite the journey, as you can see, stinting from 2008 to 2024. A lot of hard work and a lot of labor, and just keep going at it, and working at your dream and your passion.
Neline, I want to just touch on some parts of your story there, because I think it's an important thing to highlight, especially to younger physios starting out, that your career, you started with a lot of maybe guidance, or you started in a good setting with great professionals around you. How important do you think that is for sort of laying a foundation in your career?
Um, they always say you as good as the people you surround yourself with, and I had the privilege to work in a very early stage of my career with two exceptional sports physios, and you're never too old to learn. And Jackie and Ian taught me a lot and helped me shape to be the professional I am today. During my stint at Bidvest Wits, I had the privilege to work with Dr. Levasan Pillay, and a lot of what I know today, I've also learned from him. I think you need to surround you with people that have been at the craft for years, and have reached the heights that you want to reach as well. And you need to learn from them. Obviously, you take what you like and you make it your own, because we shouldn't be copy paste models. And you're going to like something one physio does, but not everything. And you need to take and make your craft your own, because at the end of the day it is our profession, and we should aspire to be better at what we do every day, and you should learn something every day as well. I don't know if that answers your question, Nick.
That's a perfect answer. And then go from there for me and just talk about why do you think it's important to be involved in multiple sporting codes? So your background is pretty diverse. You've run your own practice, you've worked in a sports space, outpatient setting, you've done hockey, cricket, football at all the way to professional level. Why is it so good to have a diverse skill set as a sports physio?
Uh, as a sports physio in private practice, you're going to have various clients coming through the door, and you need to understand each athlete's sporting code. So you're not going to understand a sporting code if you haven't been involved in a sporting code. So you really need to learn your craft, and also learn the sport that and the demands of each sport that you get to work with. And in private practice, your first patient might be somebody that's training for a marathon, and the person that comes in after that is a cyclist, and you finish your day off with 3 schoolboys that all play rugby. Surround yourself with different sporting codes, because it also helps you understand biomechanics and human movement better at the end of the day. I think the more you know, the better you can be at your craft or at your profession.
I really like that answer because I think sometimes it's a disadvantage to just go too deep into just one sporting code,
Yes.
for example. I think it makes you a little bit more adaptable when you can you've got a bit of context around cricket, hockey, running, cycling, etc. I think maybe that's a good segue into, I know you are a very active person in your own right. I know you run, you cycle. Talk us through, why do you think it's important for sports physios or aspiring sports physios, or maybe physios in general, to have some sort of involvement in recreational sporting activities?
Okay, here, Nick. I've got 2 things to answer here. I'm going to start off with, you don't trust the skinny cook, do you? So I'm going to start there. But I've always participated in sports, and quite a bit of sports from a young age, from our early days. But I think the big turning point for me happened in 2009 when I treated a patient that was training for comrades. Until today, his voice echoes in my head, where he had an ITB injury, and I told him he needs to do off-feet conditioning. And he looked at me and he's like, "But you won't understand." And I was like, okay, you actually have a point here. I don't understand the mental aspect of it. I don't understand what your body's going through, because I'm not a runner. And need and behold, shortly after, I did my first 21K, because I felt that if I want to know what an athlete's going through, I also need to put my own body through it. So I just think when you're physically active, you understand the biomechanics around what an athlete's going through better, human movement better. But also, you also understand the mental side of training, the physical demands better, as well as if you've been injured, you understand the mental side around the return to play and getting back to your peak performance a little bit better. So from that side, I feel it's very important that we are active and we do exercise. I also think that, recently, having gone through shoulder injury myself, you understand the process a little bit better, having to get to that return to play. And I will never tell a patient again to trust the process, because it's a weighted thing to tell a patient, because that process is very, very hard. It's not easy going through an injury, and a major injury, and making a return to play. My return to play is not throwing a ball or playing hockey or anything again. It's just getting back to my regular job. And just the process of getting back there has been quite tedious, and trusting it was quite hard. So definitely mental aspect, physical aspect. And then I think lastly, why exercise and being active is important to a physio. It enhances our professional credibility, Nick. I think just it shows that we're also competent, we know, and it gives you a better connection with your athlete at the end of the day. because they know that you also train, you also understand the demands that it puts on your body to be an athlete. Yes, we might be average athletes and we just exercise for the fun of it and to stay healthy and fit. And I also exercise to be able to run around with my child when she's 18 and take her for her first mountain bike race, but that's just me. It keeps you young, but it's also the core values of our profession, if you think about it.
I think even when you're working with professional athletes, I think there's still an element of advocating for, just health and physical activity and being able to advise from your own sort of experience in being a participant. And I think Darren Berry from our last episode touched on something super important, which kind of went through the whole conversation, which was being relatable to your athletes. I think if your athletes see you cycling, running, even on tour, you're out in the morning going for a run before the day starts so you can bring the best version of yourself to the team and all those sorts of things. I think it does give them more buy-in. It gets you a little bit more respect. They can kind of see how you value this thing of your body and your well-being as well. So that's super important.
I actually, Darren, I actually know Darren very well. I actually trained under Darren a bit when I was into endurance sports. Darren helped me training for a couple of trail runs and mountain bike races. So 100% agree. It does make you more relatable with the athlete. And I just think it gives you a better connection, because relationships at the end of the day, when you have to build a relationship with the athlete that you're working with, they have to trust you. They have to trust you with their health, and then working with athletes, a lot of them, I found that sometimes athletes can hide injuries because they're scared, that you're going to keep them off the pitch, and there's a lot of mental things that go in with that. They're scared they're going to lose their place in a team. But if they trust you and they find you relatable, they'll open up a little bit more and they will trust you with their health. They will know that you want to see them play just as much as they want to play, but that when you say no, it's a no for a good reason, because you have their health and their future and their career as a best interest at the end of the day. So I want to say that exercising and being relatable through exercise also enhances your soft skill with I told you the English airtime, eh? I think the trustworthiness, and it just enhances your soft skills a little bit more as well, because communication becomes easier because you're relatable. So it's a twofold thing. It's not just the physical, there's also a soft skill aspect to it.
Neline, since you opened that door, I want to walk through it with you. What do you think is important, or how do you go about, I've worked with you before. We've had conversations since we kind of met 2021 when both of our unions went professional, and we probably had some of the same challenges and had great discussions together. But I found you as someone who's a good communicator. You've got excellent clinical skills. You've got great people skills. You're a relationships person. You're someone with high integrity. How do all those things come into your role in sports physio, and how important do you think is it to use those to connect with your athletes? You've touched on some of it, but maybe take us into your most recent role, especially with the Protea women.
Like I say, communication and let me just backtrack a little bit. There's a lot of good physios out there, and we all have the clinical skills, but we often forget the soft skills around it. And the difference between a phenomenal physio and let's just say, it makes a big difference if your soft skills are developed. You need to learn to listen, and when you listen to an athlete, you also build a clear communication channel, and they will trust you with what's wrong, the injury. And once you assess the injury and you diagnosed it, now you start with this whole return to play and, the whole rehabilitation process. They will trust that you will do the best to get them back onto the pitch, But all of that comes from building a good relationship, They'll know when you say no, it's a no for a good reason, because there's trust and clear communication. Further, I think also if you have good relationships and good communication skills with your athletes and your patients, Nick, you get to know them, and you get to know their fears, and the mental side, and how each of them deal with certain aspects. I often think of it, say, for instance, somebody's injured and they're afraid of the water, You'll only know that if you guys have actually spoken about it and you communicate. You're not going to then program swimming as an off-feet modality for the athlete, because this one's not going to get into the water. This one's not going to get into the ice. She absolutely hates ice. So I just think relationship building and clear communication and establishing trust is very, very important when you get to work with athletes. It's a privilege for you to also be trusted at the end of the day. And I think the soft skills really shouldn't be underestimated, because it makes a huge difference. Often a patient will come in and they start telling you, and often clinicians just take over with questions instead of just taking a step back and just sitting down and listening. Because if you actually listen, a patient will tell you exactly what's wrong with them. And that'll give you a clear indicator of where to start with your evaluation.
I think it's such a good point, but if I can segue as well, where you've taken the time to develop all the soft skills, I think soft skills, they are incredibly important, but it also takes some personal development and awareness to develop the soft skills. So you almost have to work on yourself as a person before the physio, and then you get the soft skills, and then you can kind of integrate it. So it's kind of like not a pyramid, but it's a spectrum maybe almost. And I know you've done a lot of work on yourself as a person, and maybe it's your life experience, your professional experience, being a mother, business owner. You've had so much diverse experiences and character development, and you've been able to kind of bring that back into your career, which is incredible. Neline, I want to touch on. I think a lot of people, I think your career, you're still going to have many more highlights. And maybe the Proteas woman is you're still walking towards the top of the hill. But I think it's what a lot of people would love to sort of hear your insights on. What are some of the challenges you found in moving from, let's say, the Mpumalanga Rhinos, where you are in men's domestic cricket, and then before then the Titans, also men's domestic cricket, but one's a championship-winning franchise year on year, like the Titans, to the Rhinos, which is it's a start from scratch, build systems from the ground, challenged with resources, and now you're in international cricket. What are some of the challenges that you face now compared to your previous experiences in cricket?
Nick, I think it's a twofold question. There's work challenges, and then there's also transitioning from men's cricket to women's cricket. There's some things in the women's sporting space that we often overlook, and you don't even think about them. For me, working with female athletes comes with different challenges from a mental and a physical aspect, things we often don't think about. I'm gonna maybe first touch on that, and then the physical aspect of the work. In the female space, we often don't. Things I had to learn to consider was the mental challenges around, say, for instance, the menstrual cycle, where the athlete finds themselves within the cycle, and the emotional and the physical side to each of that. If you think about it, let's go ovulation phase. Female athletes are more prone to ACL injuries during the ovulation phase because of the hormonal changes. And then you think of, we have a match today. A player's in phase 4, which is the menstruation part of the cycle, and she has cramps, she's fatigued, she's feeling groggy, and she still needs to put out peak performance. So there's a physical and a mental side to that on match day, which is something you really don't have to consider when you're working with men. There's a couple of other challenges on match day as well around female hygiene, which, it's a whole another topic for discussion, because it's also, when you're programming for them, you also have to consider where they are within their phase, so there's that. Those are things I never had to think about when I was working with the men. The boys just pitch and they play, and there's something, you never had to consider, where are you in your cycle? So from working with the actual athlete and what the female athlete brings to the table and the challenges they face has been quite enlightening. I've had to do some, even as a female, I had to do some extra reading and some self-study, and I'm really sharpening myself up in that aspect to just understand the female athlete, the mental side as well as the physical side a little bit better. There's not a lot of research out at the moment, and I know there's leaps and bounds being made at the moment by I know if you think of Candice McMillan and Yolandi Jacobs, they're really going forward with that at the moment. But that's been the one side of it, having to understand that. And then there's, as a professional, the challenges with coming, working in an international space. And I think this is something we don't often see, or you guys don't often know, is that we only get to spend physical time with the athlete when they're in camp and when we're on tour. And when we're back home, they all go back to their domestic sides, and you have to do handovers to, the physio at the domestic level. So you often not the hands-on physio doing the RTP and doing the rehabilitation. You have to trust your colleagues. And I think their communication is a very, very important skill. And you really have to have communication and administrative skills to stay on top of where the athlete is within the return to play process. And it becomes a collaboration between two different, let's call it companies. Myself and Zane will work with the domestic physio and SNC to make sure that the player progress through the RTP. So I think that's probably a challenge, but it's not a challenge because at the moment we found ways to make it work really well. So more or less.
I think that's a great answer, just because you've also highlighted, I think, a very real element of it and it is exactly that. I think modern cricket is becoming even more challenging in this space, where you've got, you are the national team clinician, but then you work with all the domestic physios, but then some of your international players also go and play in leagues around the world as well. So we're all becoming a little bit more connected, and it's challenging us from how do we communicate, how do we monitor, how do we keep our relationships open and trust and handover, and kind of still keep our athletes at the middle of all of this.
I think what's always really important to remember, Nick, it's not about the physio, it's about the athlete. It's not about you, it's about them. And what do I need to do to make sure that they're fine? I need to communicate with my colleagues. I know I need to trust my colleagues, and we need to communicate, and we need to elaborate and, collaborate. There's the word, sorry. You need to collaborate, and it's an ongoing process of communication back and forth, with the athlete's best interest at heart. Yeah. That's where
Neline?
Writing a return to play, you really have to be on it and make sure that everybody understands the process and where you want to be within the RTP. Clear guidelines of your progression criteria so that everybody's on the same page, and then communication around it. The athlete should know, what do I need to be able to progress, as well as the clinicians. So,
I think it's a very fine line that you've got to tread, I can imagine, as the national physio, where you also don't want to micromanage your colleagues, but the national women are under your care as well. So you kind of need to carefully balance the relationship with fellow professionals, and obviously, like you say, having the athlete in the middle of that. But I'm sure with your skill set and personal skills, you're doing just fine there. Let's maybe touch on some of the your experiences on your most recent tour. You've returned from Sri Lanka not too long ago. It's not your first time touring with the national team to the subcontinent. Give us some of your experiences and challenges from a physio point of view. One, going on a big international tour, and then maybe two, specifically in the subcontinent.
Oh, yeah. I've been back for 4 days. It's been good to be home. The subcontinent's always an interesting area to tour to, Nick. There's a lot of things that you have to consider around hydration, recovery, illness, managing. I think the best is to explain from a lot of it. Physio side is you're going to have a lot of girls that they'll cramp, and you have to manage that around it, and knowing your rules around the game, how much time you've got to assess each player while you're on the pitch, and what you can do for them on the side of the pitch. It was a short but hot tour. It's always warm in the subcontinent, so recovery becomes key. Managing the player and the player's well-being around that becomes really, really key. Think of 38 degrees Celsius that feels like 43. It is extremely hot. You open the door and you're immediately sweating. So the conditions are tough. I don't think you can always prepare physically for the conditions in the subcontinent. You can be the fittest team around. Your hydration strategies can be on point, but it is tough out there. And recently at the recent tour, we've had a couple of girls that struggled with heat-related injuries and illnesses, and the management around that is different to managing, home tour. I have to say that it's not just teams coming in to travel to the subcontinent that suffers those. Actually, the locals all suffer, and sometimes they suffer before us. So you just can't adapt to that as quickly as what we'd like, And I think, it becomes player management. I don't know if I've answered your question 100% from a physio point of view. It's more like an athlete management point of view.
I think you've touched on all the points, because in these sort of instances, I think it's good for physios to see that physio encompasses a lot more than just one-to-one clinical treatment. We are involved or have to have an understanding of sports medicine, environmental conditions.
Yes.
There's an exercise physiology component. There's a management component. It's so much more than just being able to strap really well, or being able to return to play an athlete, or do a good assessment on field or something like that. It's a really big skill set that we need to have.
On the strapping point, Nick, I just want to throw a little curveball in here. The amount of sweat and humidity, I promise you, getting strapping to stick in the subcontinent is not easy. You go through cans of Tenso spray, and you really have to trust your strapping and the quality of your strapping to make sure that it actually stays on and it actually gives the effect that you want it to give. And it still needs to be comfortable, because now suddenly underneath the strapping you've got an aspect of copious amounts of sweat that you didn't think about.
I'm gonna put your Instagram handle in the description and on all the posters for this episode. But I saw your post summarizing your Sri Lanka tour, and I wanted to actually ask you. I saw you do individual Ziploc bags with K-tape, and you've got every player's name on. I thought you are so organized, but I'm guessing it's because of what you're saying now around the strapping, sticking, the humidity, all that sort of stuff.
Not only that, it's for a time management point of view as well. If you get to the change room and you have to strap 8 people and you've got half an hour, cutting the actual KT before applying it takes a little bit of time. So for me, that's become a time management thing and a player preference. So some players would like to strap at the hotel and get it out of the way before they go to the field, where others will only strap certain things when they're batting, but not when they're bowling. So it became a little OCD Neline thing to do. Just from a time management point of view, and managing my own time and availability a little bit better. So you know what you're going to strap, you know which athletes you're going to strap. So I started doing that and each one's got their little name on it and with exactly what I need to strap. And then I also have a spare one in my bag already cut for them in case it does sweat off.
I love that. I think it also just shows how prepared you can be or should be as a sports physio, but also it's just the attention to detail that I'm so impressed by. I saw that on your Instagram and on that carousel, and I thought, jeepers, this is something that I can also prep a little bit better for, because like you say, you know what you're strapping with which players. Why not save a little bit of time in the pre-match routine? So I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah,
I definitely want everybody to go see that, and it's on your Instagram.
It gives the player time to, they don't have to worry about strapping. Obviously, if I have to also say this is because match day started at 10 and we left for the field quite early, and sleep is very important as well as a part of recovery and preparedness. So I wasn't going to call girls in at 7 o'clock in the morning to come and do pre-match strapping, where you've got so little time in the morning to prepare. Obviously, when there is when match starts at 3 or 5, a lot of the girls do come and strap in a strapping slot prior to bus departure to the stadium. So it's time management, and it's knowing what your players need within. And this comes back to communication, I think, Nick. We touched on it earlier. The better you know your player, the better you can be prepared to help your player to be ready as possible for match day and to manage their own space as well. Some girls want to be quiet and not be bothered, and others, don't mind being bothered just before they have to run onto the pitch. So you'll only know that if you have a good relationship with each player.
Yeah, so many great points, Neline. I want to sneak one more question in, but maybe just a comment on your last piece there. I think it's one of the things that make cricket so unique, playing in multiple formats. And like you say, having a match day start at 10 a.m. Versus a match day and maybe a format like T20 cricket, which might start at 5 p.m. versus when you're playing red ball cricket and you've got maybe, again, a 10 o'clock start, but you've got multiple days in succession. I think that also kind of keeps you on your toes as a physio in cricket, because there are these little nuances to the sport that kind of vary depending on format and all these sorts of things. So yeah, the cricket physio, it is quite a unique space to find yourself in, but having that broad skill set and being willing to be adaptable and sort of learn as you go, I think those are really key factors. Before we wrap up, sorry.
No, I think that you hit the nail on the head there with being adaptable, because each format in cricket comes with its own challenges, and its own requirements at the end of the day. And you need to be adaptable to understand that, some days you're going to work 16 hours because that's what the day requires, and other days you will have a quiet day because a batting day during a test match is a quieter day, because you can handle a lot of the work that you need to handle at the field, where T20 and ODI, especially when there's a fast turnaround between matches, requires a lot of after hours work. So you as a physio need to be adaptable and be willing to be adaptable at the end of the day, because the requirements and the challenges of the job differs from format to format. So you really hit the nail on the head about adaptability.
I think that's great context for everybody just to hear it from someone at the pinnacle the women's cricket game. So thank you for that, Neline. Just one last question to wrap up. I want to just know, are there any concepts or theories or, pathologies, processes in physio that you kind of like contemplating and working through at the moment? I just want to highlight that even someone that's at the top of the field in your game is also thinking about, problem solving continuously.
Nick, I'm currently working on two different aspects. The first one is just because I've got medicals coming up in the next month. We've got our annual medicals coming up now at the end of May. And I'm working on my MSK screens to make them more personalized, because at the end of the day, the best indicator for an injury is a previous injury. So I'm working around getting a baseline MSK, but then personalizing every player's MSK around their previous injuries and their injury history to gather more data around that to just predict where they are. I know a lot of screens can't predict an injury, but like I said, the best indicator probably is a previous injury, because that's a compromised area. So at the moment I'm playing with, especially with the Vald and the Dynamo that we have available, I'm formulating a screen for every player that is personalized to them, because you don't get a copy-paste model for athletes. They don't have the same injuries. Their bodies aren't the same. Their biomechanics aren't the same. They weren't sculpted the same. So that's the one thing I'm working at the moment. And the other one's a little bit more personal. And I'm going to take you back to the shoulder up. I think a lot of physios often overlook the mental side around return to play. An athlete has gone through all the rehab, but they don't get over that final hurdle. Why not? I actually read an interesting quote. It said, an RTP is not complete if an athlete still thinks that they're broken. And I'm tapping into the mental aspect of physiotherapy a little bit more, just because having gone through it myself at the moment and feeling that I can relate better to the girls that have all had shoulder ops, because now I understand that stiffness in the morning when you wake up, because I'm almost done with my rehab, but there's still some things that's just not normal. So definitely the mental aspect around return to play and rehabilitation, and what we can do better as a clinician to aid our athletes in that process to help them get over that final little stumbling block, making a full recovery with the mental aspect. I know we have sports psychologists that can help with that, but often you're the person on tour with the athlete and they don't have access to the sports psychologist. So what can we do to make that process easier? We have psychology as part of our curriculum as students, but I feel like maybe, it should be more sports psychology based than the whole broad spectrum of, Schrodinger's cat and Sigmund Freud. It should be a little bit more apt to what we're going to deal with, because there's a psychological aspect in all facets of physiotherapy, not just sports therapy. That biopsychosocial model comes to mind here, and that's something I'm exploring a little bit at the moment. Just brushing up on that and evolving myself as a clinician to have a better understanding.
I think those are such important points that you touched on. I think screening is never going to not be a part of sports physio, especially in team sports. And then the psychological aspect of return to play, I agree with you wholeheartedly. Sometimes from surgeons to physios to coaches, we kind of sometimes treat athletes as like robots or piece of machinery where the structure in the shoulder gets fixed. Why don't you just crack on? But there's so many things that are processed, and we know how complex pain processing is. And I think it's such a great skill set for the physio to be able to one, relate, and then two, kind of almost coach your athletes through that, not to take over the psychological sort of piece, but to kind of support and understand and empathize and empower to kind of help them deal with that. Because sometimes you also deal with athletes that they've only had one major surgery or one major injury in their career. They're not used to going through this process. So they're very reliant on the professional to sort of guide them through. And the professional can't be treating them as if they're a piece of machinery. We fixed your wheel alignment, now you must just go out and drive again.
It comes back to that soft skill again, Nick. The communication and the relatability. And it comes back to building trustworthy relationships with the athlete at the end of the day as well. And this is just another feather in the cap or tool in your toolbox to help them to get back to peak performance. So we're often in a multidisciplinary setup, and if you have the skills and if you know what to look out for, you can also then quicker refer on where the need be. But if you don't see the signs and symptoms, you're not going to know when to refer or how to best help an athlete at the end of the day. So I think it sounds so cliche. Mental health often becomes a very cliche topic, and mental fatigue often becomes a very cliche topic. But I do think it's a very, very important aspect of what we do at the end of the day, to tap into that as well, because you'll be able to help the athlete better at the end of the day. Yeah.
Neline, I just want to thank you for sharing all your knowledge with us. I actually forgot how great it is to connect with you and chat to you and hear your thoughts on things, from our CSA conferences to field side in our early days of the Rhinos and the Tuskers. But it's an incredible privilege to have you here, to see where your career is going, to see you as a leader in our field, and I think your story and your journey will definitely inspire a lot of physios to kind of keep on and aspire to whatever their dreams are. I'm going to link your Instagram and then your LinkedIn
there's not a lot.
details.
There's not a lot of sports physio there, Nick, because I'm a mom first and a physio second. Physio is my passion, but my family is my why. So you're not going to get a lot of sports-related things there. It's very few and far apart, but there is some things there. But I'm always free to have a chat to anybody that needs an ear. I'm a firm believer we're never too old to learn something, and we can all learn something from each other at the end of the day. Whether you're in ComServe or whether you've got a PhD, I promise you can still learn something from the lady in ComServe.
Absolutely. So we want to thank you and encourage people to connect with you if they feel compelled to do so. I'm going to give them some avenues to do that on your LinkedIn and socials, etc. But main point, thank you for sharing your time with us. Thank you for sharing your insights. I know you post-tour and you're leaving again soon, so all the best for your upcoming tours. And we will be rooting and following the Protea women as proud South Africans. So all the best to you.